joining us today. You all are participating in the process to vote McClintock out. So I want to thank you. Very important right now, more than ever, to participate in the process because now is the time that people are tuning in. We originally were planning a debate between all the candidates so that we can see the differences between them and that we can hear some rebuttals, some challenges, but unfortunately we weren't able to have that. One of the candidates dropped out and decided not to join us, so Regina instead decided to have this event to give the people of District 4 a voice, to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions on her background, her policies, and many of the issues that everyone here feels is very important. So to introduce myself, my name is Tomas Evangelista, and I am a dreamer. I'm a DACA recipient in District 4, and I've been speaking out over the last year about immigration. And I've had the opportunity to speak to many people like Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Mark Zuckerberg, and other Republican representatives from California on this issue. And I still have yet to find someone in Congress that can speak to the immigration issue better than Regina Bateson. And I endorse Regina for more than her issue, for more than the immigration issue that we have today. I endorse her because she is someone that is very credible and that actually answers the questions that we need to hear today. And so that's why I endorse her. And when I met her exactly a year from today. And this is a story that I haven't told anybody, but she was one of the first persons to reach out to me. And then a few weeks later, I got an email from Regina, and I had just given or pledged $50 to a candidate. And this email was very well written, and she said, I just want you to be careful because I realized that you had pledged some money to a candidate, and I don't want her or you to get in trouble. I had no idea about the FCEC rules that I couldn't donate to a candidate, but she took the time to look through that because she was concerned that this would become a controversy in District 4 later on. And so at that moment, I realized this candidate stands up for what is right. She's not afraid to make the tough decisions when we need to. And so that's why since then I've had a positive view on Regina. I know that she will stand up for us in Congress and be there for us. So without further ado, I want to introduce you guys Regina Bateson.
Out today, and I want to say there are a couple seats right here in the front. I'm very friendly. If you're tired, don't feel shy about sitting down. See, this is the teacher in me. You sometimes have to lure people to the front of the room. But in all seriousness, I want to first thank you for taking the time out of your weekend to come today and be part of the democratic process. You know, it's really important that we have informed voters as we're going into the primary election in June, because this race really matters. I know that it matters for our community because this is right where I grew up, right here in Roseville and in Granite Bay in particular. I went to our public schools, and I was really lucky to have our community instill some very positive values in me, especially teaching me the value of hard work and the power of education, which has allowed me to go on and do some remarkable things in the rest of my career. I went to college at Stanford, and then after 9/11 I joined the Foreign Service, and I worked in Washington, D.C. and Latin America on border security issues. Then later went back to school, and I got my PhD and ended up teaching at the university level, training our next generation of leaders. But I stepped away from my career to run for Congress against Tom McClintock, because I think our region deserves better than him. My focus is getting real results for people here. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You know, we want to have good paying jobs. We want to have great public schools. We want to be making sure that we can get more people health insurance coverage at lower prices with better quality. We want to make sure we have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and that we are protecting this beautiful environment that we're so lucky to live in. So in short, that's why I'm running. I am so glad that you're all here today. And again, this is a really important part of the campaign. It's when, in just a few days, if you vote by mail, your mail-in ballot will be coming to your house. House. You might be getting your sample ballots this weekend. This is the time to be looking hard at the candidates, asking us hard questions, and making choices for yourself about who you trust to represent you in Congress. So I want to open myself up entirely to your questions. We have got a system going here where questions have been submitted on cards, but I also want to make it really clear that I love answering hard questions, and this was a pretty glowing introduction by Tomas, but the goal is not for this to be, some kind of softball event. I really wish we could have been having the robust debate right now that you all deserve to see. I was excited and ready to attend, but unfortunately another candidate wasn't. So I want to make sure that this is really an authentic opportunity for you all to get answers to questions, whether they're easy questions or hard questions. Okay, so with that, I think Tomas is going to kick us off.
So I want to remind you guys that you guys are welcome to ask any questions. Molly will be collecting the questions. There's index cards that you guys can write your questions on. Also for the people tuning in on Facebook, you're also welcome to ask us a question, and we'll try to ask that to Regina, and that will be the process going forward today. So.
Okay, I saw a hand here also real quick.
Yes.
Yes, in my career I had the chance to interact with Mr. McClintock a number of times when he was an assemblyman and a state senator. In that period of time I had the opportunity to observe his debate technique, if you'd like to describe it that way. What would you do to prepare for a head-on debate with Tom McClintock?
Sure, so I'm happy to address that quickly, and then we'll go into the questions on cards. And I should say also, if anybody else thinks of a question while we're doing this, my understanding is that you have cards.
Yes, I have more.
And so if anybody,
Just raise your
if you
hand.
sort of wave your hand, we can pass a card to you and you can pass it back in. All right, so how to prepare for a debate with Tom McClintock. I think we can fairly say that I've been preparing for that my entire life. This is pretty embarrassing, but my parents actually, I think, still have sort of a shelf or a box in our garage.
Big box.
It's really big. It's full of trophies from high school speech and debate. I don't usually bring this up in the context of the campaign. I was the #3 debater in high school in my year in the state of California. I have a lot of experience with kind of extemporaneous back and forth exchanges, both from my time in the State Department and from my work as a researcher. I've spent years presenting my research, presenting sometimes challenging conclusions or unexpected findings, and getting a lot of aggressive pushback. I've had economists jump up in the middle of my talks and start berating me. I should say that I've also been very successful in a field where women are underrepresented and have shown the ability to hold my own in those kind of back and forth exchanges. So I actually feel quite well prepared for a debate with him. I think the most challenging aspect might be getting to come. And we've already seen that that is not a partisan matter. Some Democrats don't even want to show up to debates. So how can we incentivize people to come to debates? I think that raising the profile of this race, making sure this race is getting the media attention it deserves, and really doing good planning. So I think laying some groundwork to make sure that a debate with McClintock is planned with appropriate advance notice, that it's in a real high-profile venue, and that there are serious moderators, that there's serious media coverage planned, would actually be quite critical to getting him to come. Because in the 2016 election for this district, there was only one debate, and it was held at 7 a.m. on a weekday with basically no media coverage. And I think that's wrong. I think that people deserve a real choice and deserve to see candidates interact with each other and debate back and forth and exchange ideas and answer hard questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll jump into the queue of questions, I think, now.
This will be the first question, and it says, one of your Dem opponents talks about universal primary care on her. Is that the same as universal health care coverage? What is the difference?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and it is a question I've asked myself many times. I am really proud to distinguish myself from the other Democrat running in the race in that I have a clear, consistent position on health care and have throughout the entire campaign. I think that first we need to stop the cuts to health care that are being proposed, whether we look at Medicare. CHIP was just on the chopping block. For everyone else, the price of insurance is going up, And in fact, McClintock's recent vote on the tax bill will result in about 30,000 people in our district losing their health insurance. I think the first step at the federal level has to be to stop those attacks on care. I also think we should bring down the price of prescription drugs. That's an area where there's a good amount of bipartisan agreement. And we have to expand coverage. I think that to do that, we stabilize the individual market and then look at ways to bring in more people by bringing down prices and also I think quite possibly by introducing a public option that would make sure that everybody has at least one high quality option that they can buy into for health insurance. I am confused by the position of some of the other Democrats in the race on health care, which has ranged from supporting single payer to not supporting single payer to there is a statement on a website now about universal primary care. And that's a question I actually tried to ask at a forum back in Kings Beach in January. I actually asked her to clarify her position on health care and she did not answer the question. I wish we were having a debate right now so we could find out the answer. It's very unclear to me what universal primary care means. Does that mean primary care is free for everyone? Does that mean that you just have access, but maybe you have to pay out of pocket for it? I mean, I just don't know.
Second question. There are a lot of calls for impeachment of the president, but that has real downsides for the unity of our nation. Do you join the calls for impeachment or not?
Well, I think the first step is a robust investigation, and I think that's absolutely the most important thing. I support the creation of an independent, bipartisan commission modeled after the 9/11 Commission to thoroughly investigate foreign meddling in our elections. I also think we need to be strengthening the oversight committees in Congress. You know, right now we have a judiciary that's basically doing its job and, you know, holding its own, but Congress isn't providing the accountability that they need. So I absolutely think that we need strong accountability from Congress. But I'm not a person who jumps to conclusions, you know, without seeing the evidence. So I'd say first, develop the evidence, show me the evidence, and then we either talk impeachment or don't talk impeachment. I think that if the evidence is there, then yes, it's something that I could support. But I would want to see the information first and then make a determination.
Good. Okay. How do you think we can get more youth involved in politics and civic engagement?
All right, this is really important. You know, we've done some estimates and modeling about who we think is going to turn out in the June election, and the numbers for people under the age of 24 in particular are really low, and they should be so much higher because, you know, the younger you are, the more the policies we're setting now are going to affect the whole rest of your life. So this is something I take really seriously in the campaign. We have an internship program that's up and running. We actually have at least one intern here. There might be others hiding somewhere. So if you have questions, we can definitely answer them. But we have high school students coming into our office on a regular basis to be our interns. We also have college students and are constantly recruiting more students, especially from Sierra College because it's right across the street from our office. And that's not a coincidence. You know, I chose a location right next to Sierra College on purpose because I want to make sure that it's easy for students to get involved in the campaign and show that I care and that's important to me. That's why I'm also the only candidate running in this race who's endorsed Measure E, which is a really important bond measure going on the ballot in June to provide critical updates to Sierra College, which is just such an important part of our community and our local economy. And you know, that's a measure that's got really broad bipartisan support. So I think that by focusing on things that are priorities for younger people, bringing them into the campaign, making them part of the campaign, you know, those are really important ways to draw younger people in. But sometimes there's this myth that there are younger people issues and older people issues. And that actually, I'm not sure that that's really so true. It's not what I found entirely in the campaign. You know, people care about a good quality of life and about seeing progress and seeing opportunities. And that's true whether somebody's younger or older. Affordable housing, for example, is something that seniors often bring up with me, and people in their 20s also, you know, because if somebody's working hard or has worked their whole life, they want to be able to afford a place to live, and a place that's, you know, nice and safe and convenient to the places they need to go or need to work or want to see their friends and their relatives. So, you know, I also kind of reject the notion that there's a politics of old and young in our country. I think that if we're making our community stronger and really improving the quality of life here that benefits everybody.
Great. This is a long one.
Okay.
My number one voting issue will be the safety of my children and the students I teach. I am upset that so many children are being killed in schools from gun violence, and Congress continues to do nothing. How will this change when you are elected? What will you do to make sure we get some action from Congress so common sense gun safety laws are passed?
That's a fantastic question. And I can tell you that as a parent, it's really upsetting to me that my 5-year-old knows what a lockdown drill is. I mean, it's just, you know, I'm, I guess, old enough that I remember going to school and that wasn't the case. When the kind of drill that we did was earthquake drills. You know, we just hid under our desks, and I'm not sure what good that really does in a significant earthquake, you know, but that's the memory that I have. And I do remember that I was in high school when Columbine happened, and that was sort of when everything changed, when people's thinking changed, and all of a sudden you had to be thinking at school about, you know, what you would do if there was a mass shooting in a place where you should be focused on learning and where kids should be feeling safe and secure. So I think that the status quo is unacceptable. You know, I think we have to do more to protect the public and to protect our students in particular. At the federal level, I think it's really important to be realistic about the fact that we need progress, but we have to focus on, you know, a few things that we can get done first. So universal background checks. I think we absolutely need them nationwide. More than 90% of Americans support universal background checks, including a majority of NRA members. Actually, it's around 75% of NRA members. Here in California, we've already got a strong background check system, so this wouldn't really change much for gun owners here in our state, you know, responsible gun owners of whom we have many in our district, but we need to extend those standards for safety nationwide. I also support reviving the federal ban on assault weapons. I think there's no reason why we should have what are literally weapons of mass destruction on our streets and in some cases in our schools. But that's not the full answer to the question. You know, part of the puzzle here, unfortunately, is political. We've already got majorities of Americans agreeing with both those positions. The question is, how do you actually make those changes and make people's voices heard in Congress? And unfortunately, right now we have a Congress that is bought and sold. You know, we have too many members of Congress who are completely loyal to extreme special interest groups. And one of those is Tom McClintock. And I mean, to show you some of the ways where his views are out of step with people here, I get questions about the Second Amendment all the time. And of course I respect the Second Amendment. Sometimes I'll even say this is an area where Tom McClintock and I both agree. We actually do both respect the Second Amendment. But where we disagree is when it comes to public safety. I mean, Tom McClintock has actually co-sponsored bills that go against the recommendations of law enforcement repeatedly. He's co-sponsored a bill to remove restrictions on the sale of silencers. Police chiefs nationwide are opposed to that. If we think about the context of a mass shooting event, this would make it very difficult for people even to know what's happening. It makes it more difficult for law enforcement to respond to crimes. They've even voiced concerns that would make them more vulnerable to ambush shootings. So I disagree. I don't think that we should be making it easier for people to get their hands on silencers. I also disagree with his co-sponsorship of a bill that would have made it easier for people to buy armor-piercing ammunition. The only requirement that he listed was that manufacturers should be saying, you know, having a written disclaimer that the armor-piercing bullets are for sporting purposes only, which raises some questions. I mean, when was the last time that you saw a duck in a flak jacket? You know, so I really disagree, not just in the sense that McClintock is never going to support the common sense measures we need for public safety, but also he is somebody who's pushing the opposite agenda. He's actually pushing measures to make us all less safe and to endanger our law enforcement. So I really disagree with him on this issue.
Many constituents in California District 4 vote for Republicans because they think they are fiscally conservative and want their taxes spent wisely. What would you say to those voters to ease their fears about spending?
That's an excellent question. Well, the first thing I would say is that right now, your tax dollars are paying Tom McClintock's salary at the same time that he is taking a pension from our state government here. I mean, over the last 10 years, we have paid Tom McClintock more than $1.7 million to represent us. And what have we gotten back? Not much. So I think that a first step is voting McClintock out and getting some return on your investment when it comes to representation. But I also, on a more serious note, want to be very clear that I would not describe myself as a fiscal conservative, but I am fiscally responsible. I absolutely don't want to see wasteful government spending. That's why we need more accountability. We need to be doing more to root out corruption. We need to be actually staffing the inspectors generals of our different agencies, which right now is going completely unaddressed. And, you know, we need to be spending our dollars wisely. If we can make investments up front, that actually saves us money in the long run. So I'm completely opposed to wasteful government spending. I would absolutely be careful and judicious in how we're spending our tax dollars. But I think there's a balance, you know, and I think that some of the measures that are being proposed right now are penny wise and pound foolish. You know, they're things that sound like they're going to save us money in the short term, but actually cost us more in the long term. You know, and to go back to health insurance. You know, McClintock has voted time and time again to take care away from people and to make it more expensive for everyone else. And premiums are rising as a result. That actually means that the government ends up paying more money in the long run for the subsidies for people then to go buy their coverage and get the care that they need. That doesn't make any sense. You know, it's actually costing us money. Same thing when it comes to climate change. The GAO actually came out with a report this last fall showing that the only fiscally responsible thing to do is to address climate change sooner rather than later. Otherwise, the government is going to have to pay more money in the long run to deal with the extreme weather that results, to deal with adaptation, you know, to play catch up down the road, because this problem is not going away. So we can either invest up front and make the changes we need to make and save ourselves money in the long run, or we can turn a blind eye and kick the can down the road, but that's actually the fiscally irresponsible thing to do.
What is your perspective on the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court?
Oh, that's an easy one. It's a tragedy for our democracy. I mean, I absolutely think that the role of dark money in politics is a very serious problem. And, you know, that said, as a representative in Congress, my powers to reverse that decision directly would be limited. You know, that's not the role of the House of Representatives. So I think that the question is, what can we do to push for transparency and to push for more accountability when it comes to campaign finance? I particularly think that we need much stronger laws around disclosure when it comes to online advertising. Right now it's extremely confusing. You yourself might find yourself targeted for boosted Facebook posts or for ads online, and you're not going to know who's paying for them. You're not necessarily even going to know if they're coming from a political campaign or not, or if it's someone sort of organically sharing news with you. We have to be, as a campaign, very diligent in listing on all our printed materials, you know, paid for by Bates and for Congress. If you look at your handout, if you look at your buttons, and those are materials that, you know, each item maybe reaches 4 or 5 people, or if you share it with your neighbor, 10 people, 20 people. But, you know, digital advertising reaches thousands and potentially millions of people, and we don't currently have the same disclosure rules for online advertising. So I think that's one area where we need to make some improvements. As a general matter, I am all about getting dark money out of politics, but I am realistic about the reality of Citizens United for now.
What are ways you will improve resources for folks that have experienced sexual violence, especially considering the prevalence of sex trafficking in and near Sierra College campuses?
Okay, well, I'll start by saying this is one of the reasons I wish that we knew who questions came from. That whoever asked that question clearly has detailed knowledge of a problem right here in our community. So I would like to talk to you about it further. That's the first thing I'll say. Please come find me afterwards. Because in all honesty, I was not aware that there's a particular problem around the campus of Sierra College. But as a general matter, I mean, this is a very serious issue, and I think that continuing to fund and renew the Violence Against Women Act is one of the most important things that we can do at the federal level to be providing resources and combating violence against women. And there's a huge difference here between me and McClintock. I mean, Tom McClintock was actually one of the only members of Congress who voted not to renew the Violence Against Women Act last time it came up. There was actually even a GOP-authored version of the Violence Against Women Act renewal that was offered up as an option. He was one of only 9 House Republicans who voted against that. He couldn't even get behind his own party's approach to wanting to renew the Violence Against Women Act. And he actually called it a feel-good measure that's a waste of government money. I completely disagree. So I will always stand up for the Violence Against Women Act. I recognize its importance here in our community. I also recognize the importance of community development block grants, which filter down often through the states and provide support to a lot of organizations in our community that work on a wide range of issues, but sometimes including domestic violence and sexual violence.
Okay. Tell us why you chose to take Morse to court over her ballot designation.
All right, excellent question. Let me get a sense of the room here. So who understands this question? Who knows what he's referring to? Almost everybody. You guys are very well informed. Fantastic. All right, there's a couple people who did not put their hands up though. And I should say, this is a situation where I wish that we also had Jessica Morse here. You know, I wish we could have a really frank discussion and you could hear both perspectives on this issue. That's not possible, so I encourage you to sort of pursue asking her any questions related to this directly in the future. All right, so when you look at a ballot in California, you see someone's name, right? And then below the person's name, you see what they do for a living. You know, what's their profession? What's their occupation? So for example, my mom is, I'm going to embarrass you, my mom's a nurse. She also teaches nursing at Sierra College. There's a variety of ways she might describe herself if she was running for Congress. Who knows, maybe she'll throw her hat in the ring one of these days. She might say that she's a registered nurse. She might say she's a healthcare professional. She might say that she's an educator or, you know, a college instructor. I think the Secretary of State would probably would be all right with any of those descriptions. So when you're a candidate, you fill out a form that you turn in at the time you file your papers to go on the ballot. And it's called a ballot designation worksheet. And you list what your actual job title is right now where you're employed, but then you get to list how you want it to be described on the ballot. And the rules are basically that you have to be referring to your current job or your occupation. So it has to be something that you're doing right now or that you did in the previous calendar year. It also has to be factual, so it needs to be true. Can't be something you just made up. I can't put that I'm a registered nurse, because I'm not. And it can't be misleading. And that's where the Secretary of State has a little bit of, discretion. They look at it and they decide, would this mislead the average voter about what it is that you're currently doing, how it is that you're currently making a living. And, you guys are the judges of this. I'm not sure how much the average person pays attention to this when they get their ballots. But a lot of people say that, especially if you don't do a lot of research about an election, this is pretty influential. It's pretty important information when you're looking at the ballot and deciding who to vote for. So Tom McClintock's, for example, says something like U.S. representative or, member of Congress, something like that, and that shows people that he's the incumbent. So we all filled out our ballot designation worksheets at the time we filed to run. And in the case of, and I should say that I listed my 3 options. I put my current actual job from which I am on leave without pay, and I specified that. You give 2 professional references. I listed the head of my department and the head of HR. Seemed pretty straightforward to me. In the case of Jessica Morse, she listed 3 options, the way she wanted to be described on that worksheet, and all 3 were rejected by the Secretary of State. They then asked her to suggest a 4th option, and she did suggest a 4th option, which was National Security Fellow. Based on the materials she originally submitted, and based on the ways that she's discussed this in the past, it was my belief that that wasn't accurate. I wasn't aware of any information to suggest that she's currently a National Security Fellow anywhere. And so we did file a challenge in court. Actually, it was against the Secretary of State, not against her as an individual per se, saying that there doesn't seem to be any factual basis for this. And I think it's really important that on our ballots there's accurate information. I think that a lot of us went out and marched for truth. We've all tweeted facts matter. And this is a big reason that I got into the race in the first place, actually, was to hold Tom McClintock accountable and, to really sort of stand up for truth and facts in the era of Trump. And I think we need to apply those same standards to members of our own party also. At my core, I'm not a party person to the point that I would ever say anything a Democrat does is right. I think we should apply the same standards and the same lens of scrutiny to people no matter what their party is, if they're a Republican or a Democrat. So I took a look at this and said, I think people here deserve better. I think that you actually deserve to get a ballot in the mail that's going to have accurate information on it. And so we did file a challenge in court. She then had the opportunity to respond in writing, represented by one of the top elections lawyers in the entire country. They responded and tried to justify what she'd written. And in justification, they referenced being a member of a professional networking association that she pays a membership fee to be part of. That was kind of the basis for what they were saying was her job. That doesn't meet the requirements of what most people would consider employment. And then they were able to reference 3 professional activities that she'd done related to national security in the past year. And those were giving 2 talks at high schools and giving a talk at a nursing home. And the judge then took a look at this. There was a hearing and determined that her use of National Security Fellow and all the other national security related titles that she proposed didn't meet the requirements of the law. So he then said to the lawyers that were there, I wasn't there personally, but we had a lawyer there, her lawyer was there, and the Secretary of State's lawyer was there. He said to them, okay, you all should go confer and come up with an acceptable alternative ballot designation. And this is important. At no point was she forced not to have a designation on the ballot. There was then a conference, and they discussed. My understanding is that they came to an agreement on business person, that the title business person was agreed to by all the lawyers that were present, because she does have a business license in Washington, D.C. And they called me up, asked if I agreed to business person, and I did. My understanding is that they called her and asked her if she agreed to go on the ballot as a business person, and that she declined. And she said she would rather have no designation. And that is my understanding as to why it ended up that she has no actual designation on the ballot. So that's the outcome. Was this a confrontational thing to do? Yes. Was it controversial? Yes. Are there people who disagree with my actions? Absolutely. But I think it was important. And I think that's part of what leadership is. It's not just standing back and watching things happen and going with the flow. I think that, if you see something that is happening, and you have some reason to believe that it's not true and it's going to affect the conduct of our elections, I think you have an obligation to stand up and say that. And so I took a risk and I did.
Thank you. Here's another long one, but it's a good one. You have come out in support of the DREAM Act and support our dreamers and immigrant community, but many Americans are in favor of increasing restrictions on immigration. Are you in favor of any additional restrictions on immigration? Or do you support open borders as is often stated about Democrats?
All right, there's a lot packed into that question. So I think this is actually an opportunity to highlight the ways in which I have a really unique background that I think gives me credibility to talk to both sides when it comes to immigration. I absolutely support a Clean Dream Act, as do the majority of Americans. At the same time, though, that's not the same thing as saying we need open borders. I'm a former consular officer. When I worked for the State Department, I actually issued and denied visas. I denied thousands of visas, in fact. I've been in the position of enforcing our immigration laws. And so I understand our immigration laws matter, and we do need a secure border, absolutely. We just need to be smart in the way that we go about that. So there's not, it's kind of the way the question is phrased, they're sort of presenting a false dichotomy, between standing up for our dreamers, having a reasonable, sane immigration policy, and having secure borders. And those things aren't necessarily a direct trade-off. To the contrary, I support smart investments to make our borders more secure. Not building a wall, which we know would be a waste of taxpayer dollars, but using technology. And, So I guess the question was about any increases in sort of restricting legal immigration. You know, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that legal immigration is harming our economy or, you know, doing any other damage to our country. To the contrary, we know that if we want to be funding Social Security going into the future, if we want to be growing our country and growing our society, we need folks coming, you know, legally, who've passed their background checks, who are qualified to be here and met our requirements. So I think that, I think the calls to restrict legal immigration into the country are misguided, particularly when it comes to refugees. You know, I think it's a crime that, I'm forgetting the exact number, I think there are only 12 or 15 Syrian refugees who have been admitted into the country this year, even though there's a humanitarian crisis there. And we know that refugees are basically the best vetted and most extensively checked immigrants who come into our country. I would actually support expanding some categories. Not categories that give folks a pathway to a green card necessarily, but some of our temporary worker programs. You know, we have a situation right now where employers in our country often can't get the workers that they need. And the H-2B program in particular faces caps from Congress on the numbers of people who can come in and do seasonal work every year. And that means that we have employers who are willing to pay thousands of dollars to go through the process to certify that they can't get Americans to do jobs, that they need these folks to come. And if they don't get their request in right straight away, or they don't win a lottery, they just don't get their workers. They just can't do it. And meanwhile then, especially in Central America, where I spend a lot of time, you end up with folks who don't want to move here permanently, but who just want to work for a period of time, save some money, and then go back home. They would love to participate in a program like this, except, you know, again, the numbers are capped every year. So I would be in favor with always strong controls in place to protect workers' rights and their safety while here. I would be in favor of expanding, in fact, some of those programs that meet the needs of employers and sort of aspiring workers as well.
Great. We're getting a question on Facebook Live that I'll ask this one before. It's on LGBTQ rights. Where do you stand with federal laws direction, the federal law's direction in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when it comes to equality and non-discrimination, I think this is a matter of basic American values and civil rights. So I definitely think that our laws and civil rights protections at the federal level need to be expanded to protect sexual orientation as well and gender identity. You know, someone shouldn't be able to be fired from their job or denied services just because of who they are.
Right. Okay, this is a question from Facebook Live. And are there any statistics on what the odds are for an unendorsed candidate winning when there's another endorsed candidate by the party?
So I have not seen sort of statistics about this in particular. It is certainly the case that there are races where someone who is not the endorsed candidate of their party is the person who succeeds out of the primary. I can think of probably two examples in the last cycle. I'm pretty sure that Brian, I'm on thin ice here because I'm not entirely sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that Brian Caforio in Southern California was not the endorsed candidate of the party in the last election cycle, but was the person who advanced out of the primary on the Democratic side and is now almost won. He actually came close to winning last time and is now running again. So I'm pretty sure that that's one example. I know that in assembly races recently across the state, there have been numerous assembly races where on the Democratic side, someone gets endorsed by the party, but someone else actually wins the primary. And the fact of the matter is that the way you become your party's nominee is by winning the primary. And so it doesn't really matter at that point if someone was endorsed or not endorsed by the party. The party's support does go and coalesce behind the person who wins the primary. And we know that's especially true here in our district because everyone, no matter how they feel about the primary, has demonstrated a strong commitment to unity and to working together to beat Tom McClintock. So day after the primary, we're all on the same side.
And what do you think is the role the federal government should be in public education?
Yeah, so the federal government does have an important role in public education. I should say, though, that here in California, we have a bad situation on our hands. I mean, California ranks something like 41st out of all the states in the country in per pupil spending on education, and I think that's wrong. You know, we have such great wealth in this state. We have Silicon Valley, we have Hollywood, and yet somehow the taxes we're collecting aren't getting passed back to our students and our teachers the way that they should. A lot of that is, you know, being decided at the state level. So my hands are a little bit tied, they're a little bit limited. This is why state races matter also. Look carefully who's running for assembly, look carefully who's running for the state senate. At the federal level though, the question I ask is what can we do to support our school districts to actually help plug some of those gaps? Funding special education would be very important. Right now, you know, our districts are mandated to provide special education services to all the students who qualify. The federal government is supposed to be paying a much greater share of those costs, and they aren't. And so that contributes to the budget shortfall that our districts face. And I think most people would disagree with that. You know, let's say if the federal government is mandating you to provide these services, and these services are really important, why won't they step up and actually fund them and actually prioritize this? So that would be, I think, probably the single biggest change in terms of funding that I would make at the federal level.
Changing tunes, this is questions on energy efficiency. The Department of Energy is trying to get rid of appliance standards. How can California get the Department of Energy to get out of the way?
So that's a hard one, and I'll tell you straight up, I don't exactly know the answer in terms of what we should be encouraging California to do vis-a-vis the federal Department of Energy. I can tell you though that I think that, you know, anything that we can do to encourage energy efficiency and wise use of energy and of our natural resources is something that I support. I mean, I really think that we need to be making investments and pushing forward, not rolling back our standards. And right now that's what we see at the federal level. We see efforts to undermine the progress that we've made, to roll back the standards that we fought for, not just, you know, on this area, but when it comes to clean air. I mean, California's standards for clean air are under assault. And I think that that's wrong. You know, you deserve someone in Congress who's going to be pushing for things to get better, not making things worse and undoing progress. So I definitely disagree with the policy direction there. But I'll be honest and say I'm not quite sure what my role would be in getting California to do something specific to oppose it.
This is 3 questions, but they're all related.
Okay.
Do you support increasing funding for public education? Do you support equal pay for the same work performed by women and men? And how will you protect Social Security and Medicare? Well, they're all different, actually.
Okay. So somebody made aggressive use of your one index card, and I support that. We're all about answering questions here. Okay, so let me do them one at a time because they are a bit different. So the first one was?
Do you support increasing funding for public education?
Yes.
Do you support equal pay for the same work performed by women and men?
Yes.
And how will you protect Social Security and Medicare?
Okay, that one is a little bit longer. So the answer is yes, that I will go and protect both Social Security and Medicare. And again, I think this is something that distinguishes me in the Democratic side in this race, that this is actually a priority for me. When it comes to Social Security, there's a lot of fear-mongering out there. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, Social Security is going to go bankrupt tomorrow. The system is completely broken. That's not the case. You know, there are actually some smart, pretty straightforward things that we can do to shore up Social Security and make sure that our seniors get the benefits that they've worked hard for their entire lives and have paid into. So I think the first thing we have to do is eliminate the cap on payroll taxes.
Yay.
It makes no sense whatsoever that if you're earning less than $127,000 a year, you pay payroll taxes on every single dollar that you earn. If someone is very wealthy and is earning $500,000 a year, $1 million a year, they stop paying payroll taxes after that first $127,000. A lot of people don't understand that, and this is one of the only types of taxation we have in our country that's regressive, where people who are earning less money bear the brunt of paying the tax on their entire income. So I think that we need to eliminate that cap. And that would get us a long way toward making Social Security solvent much farther out into the future. So that's the first thing that we do. The second thing that can actually help us solve the problem of Social Security in the long run is focusing on wage growth. And this is an emphasis that actually, again, it helps people who are younger and it helps people who are older who are actually drawing on Social Security. There was this really interesting forum recently over at MyDo that was specifically dedicated to talking about Social Security. And when I was getting ready for it, I did some reading and I found something that even I wasn't aware of previously. That the last time the way Social Security was financed was really restructured was back in the 1980s. And at the time, the payroll taxes that were put into place and adjusted were covering about 90% of income in the country. Today, the payroll taxes are only covering about 83% of income in the country. And so what that means is that because of rising inequality, you have more people who are sort of very wealthy, or more wealth being distributed to the people at the very top, and more earnings being distributed to the people making the very highest salaries. And so, if you think about the fact that you only pay payroll taxes on the first $127,000 you earn, if all of a sudden you have more people making very large sums of money, but then wages are stagnant for everybody else, you've got a situation where, because of changes in the distribution of earnings in our country, less income is being taxed for Social Security. There's essentially more income that's escaping taxation. So if we can focus on wage growth and on giving people the tools that they need to get higher paying jobs, and to make sure that economic growth is distributed evenly and fairly in the country, that actually will contribute to funding Social Security, because then you have more workers who are earning higher wages that are actually going to get covered by the payroll tax. Really quickly, when it comes to Medicare, I think that prescription drug pricing is the absolutely obvious thing that we need to be addressing. We absolutely need to get Medicare negotiating prescription drug prices. I also really support ensuring that folks who are on Medicare have access to more options for treatment. I was talking to someone down in Mariposa County who's a primary care doctor there, and she was saying that Mariposa County is, my understanding is actually it's the #2 county in California for opioid addiction. And the majority of the folks who are having problems with opioids there are actually seniors. And this doctor treats a lot of them, and she was saying that right now if someone comes in, they're in pain, Medicare will cover a prescription, right? They'll cover a prescription for drugs, for opioids. If she wants to send someone for perhaps additional physical therapy beyond what's usually allowed, or massage, acupuncture, any number of different things that are also proven to reduce pain and to improve people's quality of life, those treatments are typically not covered. And so I think that we've got a system where the incentives are all wrong there, and we should be doing more to make sure that seniors, especially seniors who have issues with pain and joint problems and all these things, can get the treatment that they need.
Okay, these are all related. Talk to us about your commitment to back out if you didn't get the endorsement, and what are you doing to unite the Democratic Party's defeat McClintock? Why did you not pull out of the race as promised after the Dem Party endorsed Morse? And in the event that Morse is the Dem candidate, what are your intentions for November to defeat McClintock? Your intentions. November to defeat McClintock.
Okay. All right, so a bunch of related questions there. So it's absolutely the case that earlier in the campaign, all the Democrats running had said that if someone else was endorsed by the party, they would step out of the race. And all the Democrats running have changed their minds about that at different points in time. In my case, I had more faith in the endorsement process longer than the other candidates did. But it is true that this is something where I've changed my mind. And I have had people in the intervening weeks and months, come up to me and say things like, "You're a liar. How could I ever believe you about anything if you changed your mind about this?" And, I would say fair enough. This is something where, I'm happy to actually allow some follow-up questions here. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, I'm asking you guys for permission, but I'm just going to say, I'm going to open it up and allow for some follow-up questions after I say what I'm about to say, because I would like to have a back and forth conversation about this, and I would like you to feel that you've gotten your question answered thoroughly. That's one of the downsides to the format that we've been using up until now. All right, so I think, fair enough. I think it is fair to object if someone, in public life or running for office changes their mind about something. And it's totally fair to say, hey, what does that say about you or about your character? So here's my answer. I have been completely straight and consistent with people throughout this entire campaign about my values, my policy positions, my qualifications, and my own background. But when it comes to sort of matters of political strategy or political alliances, it is true that in the future, I might change my mind about things. To give you an example, I've committed, for example, that I plan to join the Climate Solutions Caucus if elected to the House. I think this is important. This is a group that's bipartisan. It's Republicans and Democrats who want to work together to take action to fight climate change. And I'm actually the only person running who's committed that they would join that group. But let's just imagine that, maybe another group gets formed in the House that, is really pushing forward more effectively when it comes to climate change. I might change my mind. I might say, no, I actually don't want to be part of this caucus. I'm going to go join this other group instead. Or maybe it turns out that the Climate Solutions Caucus isn't effective or isn't doing the things that I need them to do. I am somebody who's willing to take into account new information and changing circumstances. And that is also why I changed my mind about staying in the race. I am completely committed to defeating Tom McClintock, but I think that in order to do that, we need to have a credible, qualified candidate running. I was not convinced that the Democratic Party's endorsement process really reflected a full vetting of the candidates. And I was not convinced that the majority of voters in our district had their voices heard in the process. It's actually the case that the majority of our Democratic clubs in our district voted to support me. And when we've had candidates fora in the district, when all the candidates have been up on the stage and we've all answered questions, it's never been a debate, but we have all gotten on stage and answered questions one after the other, the audience has often been asked to fill out a feedback form and select who they would vote for. And pretty consistently they've said that they would prefer me as a candidate. And so it was very strange and unexpected to me to see the delegates to the Democratic Party State Convention ignore that feedback and input from the grassroots activists in our district and from the people in our district. And that's not a scenario that I ever expected to see happen, right? If you'd asked me a year ago, did I think that the delegates would listen to the input from the grassroots and from the clubs and from these forums that they were organizing all across the district? I would have said yes. I think everyone expected them to do that. And I can't explain why they changed their minds and why they didn't and made a different decision, but that was something that happened. And so at the end of the day, I was left with two options, neither of which was perfect. One option would have been to step out of the race and to say to all those people who had voiced support for me and voiced confidence in the campaign, to say that, the party machine didn't listen to you. And tough luck. And we all just have to suck it up and deal with it. Or, another option was to stay in the race, to say to all our volunteers and all our grassroots supporters, yeah, your voices matter. And at the end of the day, it's the thousands of people who live in our district who get to decide who our party's nominee is, not just 67 people in a room in San Diego. And so that was the choice that I made. Okay. Does anybody have more questions about this topic? Yes?
On that topic, I fully appreciate what you said. Totally accept it. I was just thinking 40 years ago I was a victim of Democratic Party shenanigans that did damage to my candidate. But after June, I'm the guy that submitted the question about what next.
Yeah.
Let's say Morris is elected or selected to be the candidate. The behaviors that you described with regard to soliciting votes for the endorsement have done real damage to unity amongst the progressive community in the Fourth. What can we do to address the healing?
That's That's a fantastic question. I apologize that there's a lot here. I didn't quite get to the second part of the question, or batch of questions there. All right, so what happens after the primary? Well, I think first we actually need to be laying the groundwork to run a smart campaign and a unified campaign now. And so what I say to people over and over again, and what I'm going to say very clearly right now, is that my goal is to defeat Tom McClintock. I think that's the goal of probably everyone or most people in this room, hopefully most people watching at home also. We need to keep the big picture in mind. We need to keep our eyes on the prize. And until the primary election happens, people have different views about the primary, and that's normal. It is perfectly normal that some people prefer one candidate and some people prefer another candidate. So I would encourage you all to accept that. I would encourage everyone to accept that and to treat each other respectfully. I've been saying to people over and over again, this is a situation where reasonable people can disagree. And, you may find that you disagree with your friend or your neighbor. And in that case, just let them be. Just say, okay, this is a situation where reasonable people can disagree. I've got my candidate, you've got your candidate. We probably agree on, a wide swath of issues. We agree on the broader goal. Just be respectful to each other for the next few weeks. Hopefully we can manage that. Because I do think that sort of really vitriolic language or I've heard stories from people who are both volunteers for our campaign and members of Democratic clubs, going to people and saying, you have to quit your club if you want to volunteer for that campaign, or doing things like that. That does real structural damage in the long run to the party. That doesn't make any sense. It breaks my heart to see that Placer Women Democrats, a group that was, I think, instrumental in, frankly, recruiting me, well, not recruiting me, but giving me an initial platform to become a candidate, some of that initial feedback, and really doing good work in the community, has severely fractured, as a result of this race. And I don't want to see that happen. I don't think that's a smart decision. I don't think it's a smart, any of this is not, none of this is good for a long-term sort of grassroots and progressive organizing in the district. But we have choices. Every person in this room, every person participating in this race on any side has a choice. You can choose how you treat your friends and neighbors. You can choose what kind of language you want to use. You can choose how you want to make your case. And so, if you do leave here today supporting me, I would ask you just to focus on the positive reasons why you've made that choice. Why do you think I'm the most qualified person? Why do you think I'm the most credible person? Because at the end of the day, though, and I would say also, if you know people who support another candidate in the race, encourage them to do the same also, right? Just focus on the positive aspects of your own candidate. Well, also, if people have issue questions or policy questions or things like that, that shouldn't bar us from having a frank exchange of ideas. And frankly, I think that a debate would have been really healthy for that reason, but it's not happening. Your question was also about how we move on after June. There is a unity picnic or a unity party or something like that is scheduled for June 8th. It's happening. So come on June 8th. I'll be there. I would assume all the other candidates will be there. Lots of other folks should be there. I think it's in Rockland. Am I right about that? I don't know. Well, okay, I see someone nodding. So I think it's planned for Rockland right now. But yeah, the broader goal absolutely is to defeat Tom McClintock. I think it's great that right now we have multiple candidates running around the district, doing events like this, raising interest, reaching voters, calling them by the tens of thousands, because an important part of showing how competitive our district is turning people out in June. If we can show that we have really good turnout on the Democratic side in June, even if some of those people are voting for a candidate who doesn't advance into the November election, the fact that, I'll also shout out Rosa Calderon here, the fact that her people are calling voters, encouraging them to come out and vote, that helps, right? It helps show momentum, it helps show organization and interest on the Democratic side here in our district. So I think that, we should all be working to have a really strong showing on the Democratic side in June, and then, yeah, we all absolutely need to come together and work to defeat McClintock in November.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have a couple more questions to go, and then we still, if you guys have any more questions, please raise your hand. Don't be shy.
Or comments. If we exhaust all the questions, I'm happy to take comments also.
This is a simple one. Are you taking money from Monsanto or NRA?
No and no. That's a fact.
What will be your first strategy after June 5th if you are one of the top two?
First strategy. Well, I think we actually hit on it. I think that working really hard to reach out and re-engage with everybody who's been involved in all different sides of the primary probably should be step one. And I think also, working fast to rapidly increase the size of the campaign and make sure that we can start the really broad grassroots outreach that we'll need to be doing as soon as possible. It might feel, even now, it might feel like November is a long way away. It's not. In the scale of what we're trying to do here and the hundreds of thousands of people that we need to be reaching, it is not far away. So after June 5th, there won't be a moment to lose. We'll need to get going right away to go beat Tom McClintock in November.
Great. This is another question on immigration that I missed, but I think it's very important to ask. What is the answer to border security? How do you keep drugs from coming into California from Mexico?
Yeah. All right, so, when it comes to border security, there are several things that we can be doing and doing better. Again, I mentioned the wall before. I think that the wall is a serious diversion and distraction from the smart things that we should be doing. I do support the use of basically efficient types of technology, so remote sensing, drone surveillance and aerial surveillance. I think that matters. I think that fully funding and staffing our agencies that are working on the border and ensuring that those professionals are treated with the respect that they deserve is really important. Making sure that they have the resources they need to be doing their jobs. So those are two measures that we could definitely take straight away. I'll also say that having worked in Central America for a long time, there is a big picture here. There's a big picture context. And if we can invest in helping other countries improve the rule of law, improve economic development there, but also improve policing and accountability there, that can nip in the bud some of these problems before they actually get into our country. I've had some people say to me, if you worked in Central America, what can you possibly know about security issues? What can you possibly know about violence? Guatemala, depends if you've been there or not, but Guatemala, where I worked for years and then later did my own research on post-conflict security issues, is unfortunately one of the most violent countries in the world. And it's in our hemisphere, you can just overland, get from Guatemala into the US. I have seen very violent gangs do terrible things to people there, and have seen graffiti from the very same gangs here in Roseville. So the world is more interconnected than we think, and it's not just about literally improving security at the border. If we really want to be smart about this and reducing, the penetration of organized crime into the United States, we also need to be thinking in smart ways about supporting the rule of law, back at the source, and supporting economic development in Latin America and the Caribbean too.
I hope I can read this right. Doolittle put up a straw Dem candidate and defeated Biz Johnson. Thereby, he was fined by the Fair Political Practice Commission. Is there any evidence that such is happening in a primary now?
No. So is there any, can I just ask, if you want to be anonymous, it's okay, but the person who asked the question, are you here? Okay. All right, I'm asking if someone can elaborate a little bit on the question.
The Biz Johnson campaign totally overlooked the fact that Doolittle put up a straw candidate out of El Dorado County.
Okay.
It hit them like a ton of bricks when Biz Johnson lost. Doolittle was fined by the FPPC for that behavior, didn't lose his position, didn't get unelected. But this district is known for that kind of stuff coming from the Republican side of the aisle.
Okay, and can I
Is there any hint of that with the fact that we've got 4 Democratic candidates?
So can I just ask a little follow-up question? Was that in the general election that this happened?
Yes,
Yeah.
but the, yes it was. It
Okay.
was in the general.
Yeah, so I'll say one thing just real quickly, which is that the top 2 system in California right now causes people a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety. The one good thing it does is it means that on the ballot in November, there will only be 2 people. And so this whole issue of green, libertarian, other folks going on the ballot in November and potentially splintering off votes, it doesn't actually happen anymore. And I mean, if you look back at the year that Charlie Brown almost won, when McClintock first ran here, I do believe that if there hadn't been a libertarian on the ballot in November, it's possible that Charlie could have gotten those votes and could have actually won. So the fact that there will be only 2 people on the ballot in November is actually a good thing for us here in the district. But in the short term, we do have multiple people running as Democrats and as Republicans. I can tell you that I don't know a ton about either Mitchell White or Robert Lawton, so I'm not really in a position to be able to tell you authoritatively exactly sort of who they are, what their motives are. What I can tell you is that the 3 Democrats who are women who are running have been running for nearly a year at this point, really. I mean, it's been more than a year now since Placer Women Democrats had their initial forum where candidates were able to come out and sort of test the waters as prospective candidates. So speaking for myself, it's certainly the case that no one in the Republican Party encouraged me to run for this seat. I mean, you know, to clarify a few of the wilder things that I've read online or things that have been emailed to me in the past, I've had someone putting comments on Facebook, I think, saying that I once worked for a Republican in Congress after college. No, that didn't happen. Straight after college, I joined the Foreign Service. As a Foreign Service officer, I was actually one of the youngest diplomats in the country. So if you hear from someone, oh, that I used to work for a Republican, that's not the case. I was an intern for Barbara Boxer in college, though, and I was a vice president of Stanford Democrats back in the day. So I am actually, you know, someone who's been on the Democratic side essentially my entire life. You know, I've gotten other weird comments from people saying that I'm a Republican plant, or this, or, I mean, it's just, that's not true. So please try to clarify that to your friends and neighbors if you hear any crazy stuff along those lines.
Okay. Are you in favor of charter schools and funding them?
Yeah, so I think that private charters, which end up operating not under the control of local school boards, in particular, are a serious problem, and are a serious problem for many school districts here in our area. They're also a serious problem for parents when sometimes a problem arises. I've heard stories that parents end up going to the local school board and saying, you know, there's a problem with this charter, and then they're told, oh, that charter actually operates under the authority of a school board that's dozens or hundreds of miles away. So private for-profit charters I am most definitely opposed to. However, there are some circumstances where public charters make sense. You know, I've heard of charters where, for example, maybe there's a language that's being spoken in the community, and the community really wants to do a dual language immersion program. Having a public charter can make sense under those circumstances. Maybe there's another type of specialized education that the community really wants to see. So I think that if we're talking about public charters that operate under the authority of the local school board, you know, with the same standards, then I think there's some room for discussion there, and there can be some good cases to justify their existence. But private for-profit charters, absolutely. I'm really opposed to the DeVos agenda and the current ongoing attempts to privatize public education.
This is a very controversial question.
Let's hear it.
How many pairs of shoes have you worn out going door to door?
That's a good one. That's a good one. So worn out going door to door. Haven't actually destroyed any yet. That's because I have some high quality tennis shoes though. I will tell you that in the course of the campaign though, for a while, I really only had, well these are actually different shoes, but I'm wearing tan today, but I really had one pair of black shoes that I wore for maybe the first 6 months of the campaign. And I've done some dancing in the past, and it's actually kind of like being a dancer. You actually wear out shoes pretty quickly. So I ended up doing a lot of damage to those shoes. Like I've never done the shoes before. They, at this point, are in our garage, but they're torn up, they're scuffed. One of the heels is half broken off. There are practically holes in the sides. It's, you know, you do end up spending a lot of time on your feet and a lot of time talking to people.
So this is the very last question we have, but if anybody else has any questions or comments, we would love to hear them. But what is your #1 issue that Congress needs to address, and how would you go about this?
Let's see here. So I think that speaking very broadly, our democracy is at stake. You know, I think that our democratic institutions are under assault like they've never been before, and we really need to restore Congress's role in providing balance and accountability at the federal level. You know, I think it's shocking that no matter what Trump does, no matter how offensive his language, no matter how poor his judgment, Tom McClintock is right there by his side, never disagreeing. And, you know, so I think that we really need Congress to step up and provide the check and the accountability that we need. So that's kind of a broad answer, but it's become something of sort of increasing concern to me as we've moved along with this campaign. Because I have, you know, worked on Latin America before and really studied sort of authoritarianism, how democracy can break down, and we've got some troubling things happening in our country right now. I mean, Madeleine Albright, who's someone who I really have looked up to throughout my entire career, just came out with a new book. It's called Fascism, A Warning. And there's a chapter about the United States. So I think that really standing up for our democratic institutions is very important. But, you know, on this, in terms of a specific issue, I do think that healthcare is really a pressing concern. You know, we know it's a pressing concern for people here in our district. We saw people coming out by the hundreds and even the thousands, really trying to press Tom McClintock on this last year. I can't understand why we have someone in Congress who is voting to take care away from people and make it more expensive for everyone else. I think that's wrong. And, you know, we've got a ton of healthcare professionals in our community here. This is something that's really important broadly to the community, and I don't think it's strictly a partisan issue. You know, we should be providing more care to people at lower prices and at higher quality. And again, why would we want to move in the wrong direction on this issue? So I'll definitely be a strong voice in the opposite direction in Congress. Is there anything else?
Yeah, we have a couple online. So this one says, how do you promote truth and honesty in your staff and colleagues?
It's a good question. So I think that, as I've said several times, you know, I am all about facts, all about accountability, all about transparency. I was actually just hassling poor Emma a little bit earlier today. She can tell you that I am a stickler about this. I really, you know, care about details. I care about the facts and accuracy of what we put out, sort of anything that we put out on social media. You know, I like things to be perfectly, precisely accurate. And so I do try to review the materials that are going out. If there is an error, we try to correct it straight away and try to be transparent about that fact. If we ever inadvertently misstate something, I would ask you all for your help in bringing that to my attention or to the attention of our staff, and we'll be happy to issue a correction straight away. I certainly endeavor for that not to be the case, but anytime you're working with lots of people, there's lots of information flowing around, sometimes mistakes do happen. You know, but my own approach is myself always to say, you know, if I have changed my mind about something or made a mistake about something, just to say that in a straightforward way, to tell you why, and then to try to explain what we're going to do in the future to have that not happen again. And, you know, when I've run projects in the past, worked with research assistants, or even worked with students, you know, I try to create a culture where if someone needs to tell me that something's not working, that's okay. You know, they should just come to me and say, hey, you know, I'm trying my hardest at this, but this is not going to get done by the right date. It's just not possible. We just don't have the resources to do this, or there's a problem that I've encountered. And, you know, if I know that early enough, then we can try to find a solution, or we can try to change the deadline, or we can try to, you know, work something out. I think that people sometimes get pushed into sort of fudging numbers or you know, doing things that they don't want to do or that are maybe unethical when they're up against expectations they can't meet. Or, you know, if they feel like they can't sort of ask for help or ask for an extension or something. So I've always tried to make that very clear, you know, with people I've supervised in the past, because in research, if you're sending someone out to collect data for you, you need to make sure they're not making up the data. You know, you need to make sure that they're actually doing the work and then bringing back information that's accurate.
What are the top 3 things your supporters can do to help your campaign?
Oh, that's a softball question. All right. So first would be helping us with direct contact with voters. That is absolutely the most important thing right now. We have some wonderful smaller-sized handouts that we're distributing to doors in all the communities of our district. So we need your help with canvassing. Oh, come on. Showing us, thank you. So we need your help with canvassing, we need your help with phone banking. You can sign up at the table right outside. If you have any availability, even if you want to do phone banking from your house, we can definitely help you set that up, and you can even do it remotely. So direct contact with voters is the most important thing. Next most important thing is if you're able to contributing to the campaign. That gives us the tools to be able to reach voters. It allows us to print more materials, to get more yard signs, that kind of stuff. So making a financial contribution, if you're able to, is very helpful. And then I would say helping us to reach out to people in group settings. If you're able to have a house party, or maybe even bring people together virtually, and then I could talk to a group of people. Helping us by reaching out to your network, to your friends. Yeah, I see a question.
Flower farm.
Oh, okay, thank you for reminding me. See, audience interjections are a good thing. I'll add a fourth thing, which is that we are having a large event at the Flower Farm Inn on May 2nd. It's from 5:30 until 8:30 p.m. It's going to be a fantastic evening. We've got some bands coming. We have some wonderful food arranged. It's an absolutely beautiful setting that's right on the border of Loomis and Granite Bay here, so very close to where we are. You are almost definitely invited. I see tickets in the back of the room, so if you would like to get a ticket while you're here today, you can. But it's also under the events section of our website and listed on Facebook. So if you know somebody who's not here right now and they might like to attend, then you can definitely get tickets online. Okay, there's a couple people. All right, you're the moderator here, Tomas.
All right, I'm going to ask this question before we open it up to the
Okay,
floor.
all right, then we'll get to the comments from the floor.
What is your opinion on net neutrality?
I'm for it. Okay, I saw Chris in the back.
Yeah, this is just an add-on to the previous thing. If you live on a property that has good viewing, cars going by, come see us. We'd love to put a sign on your lawn.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so that was a pitch for yard signs from Chris. So yes, you can absolutely see us, and we will be happy to connect you with a yard sign. If you live in a cul-de-sac or something like that, maybe take one and try to convince your neighbor who lives at the entrance to your neighborhood. So we do want to be strategic about where we're putting them. I saw someone else in the middle here.
I was going to ask you how do I get a yard sign?
Come see us.
Well, I'm glad to know we've taken care of you. All right, you guys have been incredibly patient, so I don't want to keep you, you've been sitting a long time. But does anybody have any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I don't know if you have it on your website.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's so many Republicans in this area. A lot of them are moderate, so a lot of my friends are Republicans. Do you have like a bullet points of what might convince them just not to automatically vote for McClintock? Because I think some of your points would be something that they can accept and it might be worthwhile to have. I didn't know if you had anything like that.
Absolutely. So this is a question about basically Republicans, how can we reach out to them and try to get them not just blindly voting for McClintock. I would actually love if you're ever able to have a party. If you're able to host a house party or something, we could invite some of them, and that's actually real effective. Once they've come and met a candidate and they've seen you're someone who's credible, who has the backing of community leaders here, they're often willing to think and take a look. But there was also a specific request here. Do we have a handout that's, or some bullet points that are tailored to Republicans? Not in a written form right now, but that's an excellent idea. But I can give you.
It would be worthwhile because I think so many people. I mean, my friends, they're just very reasonable people, a lot of them. And we see eye to eye almost every day.
Yeah.
But they just automatically will vote for McClintock, and we got to get away from that.
Yeah. So I think this is definitely the goal. Well, the goal is definitely to get those folks listening and to be talking to them.
Well, the big deal, I mean, the points were like with Trump and stuff, because so many Republicans, at least that are in the middle ground, are really appalled with what's going on. So I know that there could be a few, if they're correctly worded points of like keeping them in check and all. But I think there's also probably some of your policy points that they may be more open to, that are more middle of the road and show that it's not so scary to vote for.
And I think I'm not scary, right? I'm a pretty friendly person. So let me answer your question a little bit more specifically. So I think we're really asking for talking points for Republicans.
Right.
And I like the way you said, your friends are pretty reasonable. Because that's exactly what I like to say. We've got tons of reasonable Republicans around here. And even if you look at our local governments, We're lucky to have really good local governments in this area by and large. A lot of the folks in local government are Republicans, but here's why they're in local government. They want to see things get better. They want to see progress for our community. They want to see smart investments in our community. Again, there's a whole slew of Republicans supporting Measure E, for example, to invest in Sierra College. There's a lot that we have in common. So here's what I would suggest is a few talking points. We can brainstorm afterwards if other people have other ideas. First of all, that I'm local and committed to the community here. I'm grassroots. So in some ways, not being real tied in with sort of the insider game of Democratic politics is a good thing, I think. I think a lot of people here would be really skeptical of the idea of, a super PAC based in DC sort of backing a candidate and flopping them into our district. And that's very much not the story of our campaign. I'm grassroots. I'm loyal to the community that's raised me here and committed to getting results for us. And that's something Tom McClintock has never done. I mean, he's just accomplished nothing in the years in Congress. Again, paying his salary is not a good investment. And he's not a good partner for our local governments. So I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with people who go on the cap-to-cap trip, people who, are involved in local government here, many of whom are Republicans, who try to have meetings with him and just get his help, moving forward projects that are completely nonpartisan. We were just having this conversation about a flood control project in Auburn, for example. And, some local officials needed his office to check in on the status of some applications or some paperwork. And went all the way to DC and basically didn't get an answer. Then they went over, this happens enough that I call it representative shopping. You go to McClintock's office, you don't get an answer, and then you just have to keep knocking on more doors. They went over and actually ultimately got Senators Harris and Feinstein, got their offices to help them and to check on the paperwork and got answers within days. But McClintock wasn't even willing to engage with them. And that's not a matter of partisanship, that's just doing the job. Are you being an effective representative for the community here? So I'm loyal to the community, I'll be a good partner for our local governments, I'm fiscally responsible, and I'm also really committed to bipartisanship. I would join the Problem Solvers Caucus if elected, and that's a group that's half Republicans, it's half Democrats, and they set a few key priorities at a time where they're willing to work together and just push for good governance. So, for example, passing balanced budgets and passing them on time with the appropriations bills that you actually need, again, to be spending our money in a smart way that plans for the future. That's something that they've worked on. When Trump was threatening to cut off cost-sharing reduction payments to insurance companies, the Problem Solvers Caucus was really pushing to legislate to guarantee those payments, which would have prevented Trump in Congress ultimately from destabilizing our individual insurance market and driving up premiums for everyone. So, that's definitely a talking point you can share with them, but I'm a Democrat, but I'm committed to bipartisanship. And, Tom McClintock, I always say he's not a normal Republican. I mean, he's really on the extreme fringe.
He's really extreme, and he's all theory. I mean,
Right.
it's just all...
Right, and he's not about results, so he's not about breaking through gridlock, he is the cause of the gridlock. If you should ask your friends who are Republicans, when they look at Congress right now, do they like what they see? Do they see Congress working effectively? Do they think that we're getting good results? Almost everyone will say no. And, here's the fact of the matter. If you keep sending the same career politicians back to Washington, you're going to get the same results. So it's time for a change. And I want your help in making that happen for our district. Okay.
Well, back to the gentleman up there, I had not an argument, a discussion with one of my Republican moderate friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the border wall. I said, why spend $25 billion to build this building, this wall? Why don't you touched on it a little while ago about sensors, drones, and all that. And how about hiring more border patrol to help the economy? You're helping. He said, that's a great idea. So, but I'll back up the jump. He's exactly right. Talking point that, we can work together and get this done in a smart way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that if you want to see someone in Congress who's actually going to be a leader on immigration, both on finding solutions that make sense for people who are already here, that respect their rights, that meet the needs of our economy, but also finding smart ways to improve border security, I'm the person who can do that. If I was elected, I would actually be the only person in Congress who has ever issued or denied a visa. So I think one of the reasons we have such a dysfunctional immigration system is because the people making our laws that govern that system don't have that experience, and they haven't been in the position of having to enforce laws that are sometimes really contradictory, or sometimes don't make sense. And I mean, I've done that, so I can see the reasons why we need to make improvements, but we also need to do that in a way that's smart and it does protect our security.
Like the census.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Do you consider yourself a moderate Democrat or a progressive Democrat?
So the question is, do I consider myself a moderate Democrat or a progressive Democrat? I don't like either of those labels. I think that it kind of muddles some of the issues. I mean, I'm myself. So I do like the term progressive in the sense that it's about progress, and I'm all about getting things done, and I'm a very results-oriented, practical person. But then at the same time, getting things done requires compromise, and I think starting from a realistic position. I'm all about doing the most good for the most people in the fastest amount of time possible. And, I think that in our Democratic primary here, or the primary that's coming up, I don't think you can just draw a nice line and say, oh, I'm going to stack up all the candidates from moderate to progressive or moderate to liberal or something. I get a lot of email. I encourage people to write to me because it's interesting to see what people have to say. But I've gotten emails, again, calling me too left-wing for the district, but also calling me a Republican. I've gotten emails saying, oh, you're too moderate, you practically are a Republican. Oh, you're so progressive, no one here would ever vote for you. I mean, I get complaints on both sides of the spectrum. And I think that part of that confusion is that unfortunately people haven't gotten the opportunity they deserve to see all the candidates interact with each other and clearly differentiate themselves from one another in a debate setting. And I should say that anytime the other Democrats are willing to have a debate, I'm there. I would love to see that happen. I think you should demand it. But when we look at different issues, I think it's an issue by issue kind of difference between the candidates. There's not necessarily a lockstep difference between us. So when it comes to climate, I am really proud to be the person in the race with the strongest positions. The positions that you might call the most progressive. As I've said before, I would join the Climate Solutions Caucus. I'm the only Democrat running who has agreed to that. I support a carbon fee and dividend. I'm also the only person running who has any articulated policy about what they would do at the federal level to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that's crazy. Frankly, I don't see how you can be a Democrat running against Tom McClintock and not have a strong position on climate change. But then there's other areas where, for example, every other Democrat running at some point in the past has said that they're a strong supporter of federal single payer for health care. Federal single payer now. That has never been my position, and it's not my position right now. I am committed to, again, doing the most good for the most people, the fastest amount of time. I do think that healthcare is a right. I think it's a necessity. But I just don't see a realistic way that we do federal single payer within a 2-year term, which is what I'm running for in Congress. I think there are other first-order concerns, such as the efforts to strip care away from people to destabilize our care system, proposed cuts to Medicare. It's just not my position. And so there are differences between the candidates that are running, but it's sort of hard to just paint with a broad brush and say, this person is more moderate, this person is more progressive. Okay, maybe we'll do one more. I feel people getting restless, so I want to try this. We'll do one more and then we'll wrap up.
Mine's on a different topic.
Okay.
But it dovetails into education. I was a school nutrition director in suburban Chicago, very wealthy area, Evanston, Illinois, on the lakefront. We had 25% of our students eligible and needy, authenticated for free and reduced price breakfast. People don't equate a healthy student with a well-educated student. And it is vital. We have examples here in Roseville. I've lived here 6.5 years now, and I've gotten fully involved with the Woodbury School, with the food bank. There's need here, and it really is a hand up, not a handout. And the government is attacking that.
Yeah.
And people my friends back in the Chicago area are wary of what's happening.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And the charter schools in particular are denying running the program.
Oh.
Which that shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely, completely agree that, for kids to get the education that they deserve and to be focused and productive, of course they need to be well fed and they need to be well nourished. I mean, they also really benefit when the rest of their family is getting the support they need too, So when I've talked with people, who work in some of our school districts, and we've talked about the increasing number of students with behavioral issues, who in some cases end up qualifying for special ed. They really feel that unaddressed mental health issues with parents sometimes contribute to the stress that kids feel. And there's really a holistic package of things that we need to do to make life better for and support families in our community more. But on the free and reduced lunch and breakfast program, I absolutely support it. And this is one of the things that most horrifies me about Tom McClintock. It's something you should point out to your Republican friends, that he has actually voted to cut funding for that program in the past.
We used to serve 5,000 meals a day. We didn't have a backpack program like we had at Woodbridge School for the weekends and so on. But it was surprising. There were people who were unemployed because of various, things happening in the economy. But also parents who were single, who were ill. All sorts of issues come about that the student has no control over. And to basically attack a child is what it comes down to, really.
Yeah, no, and so I think that standing up for our families is really important. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for coming. Regina will be here for a little bit longer. If you have any questions, please come meet her directly. We have lawn signs available. We have information that you guys can hand out to your friends. So please take some and consider donating to her campaign. Thank you so much.